In today's post, I'm going to be talking about the psychological construct of self-compassion and how self-compassion can help us improve our well-being. I'm going to be covering 5 simple tips to help you cultivate self-compassion and learn to be kinder to yourself and to leave that critical self-talk at the door. In our perfectionistic society, the concept of self-compassion can feel pretty foreign to us. Many people have introduced the idea of self-compassion to just cringe and say things like, what, so you're saying I have to be nice to myself now? How will I stay motivated if I don't talk to myself harshly? One of the reasons self-compassion is so hard to practice is that we've spent the majority of our lives talking to ourselves in this critical way. It just feels so foreign trying to change our self-talk. And many of us worry that we won't be able to stay motivated if we let go of some of that harsh self-talk, but we know from the research that negative self-talk is anything but motivating. It can actually undermine our motivation, and critical self-talk is often associated with feelings like shame, depression, and sadness, and even mental health disorders like depression and social anxiety disorder. So learning to speak to ourselves in a kinder and more compassionate way is so important. Being self-compassionate doesn't mean that we let ourselves off the hook for everything or that we don't reflect or try and do things better. But when we do that in a self-compassionate way, we can acknowledge that it's hard when we don't get the results we want, or it's hard when we fail, but we can pick ourselves up and bounce back more quickly, and it's more motivating to try again. So self-compassion can be really beneficial in cultivating resilience. A psychologist and leading researcher in the area of self-compassion, Kristin Neff, talks about self-compassion as an alternative to self-esteem. When we think about our self-esteem, it's very situation dependent. So it's almost like this roller coaster where we have this kind of win or success. So let's say I really smash a task at work. My self-esteem's up here. Yeah, I'm killing it. But then maybe I fail at something or I have a setback and boom, now my self-esteem is down the bottom. Maybe I had a really good opportunity come up. Boom, my self-esteem is back. And then, oh no, I've had some rejection. I'm nothing. My self-esteem is down here. So self-esteem is very situation dependent, whereas self-compassion isn't about being above average and being the best and having to achieve all these things. It's about recognizing that painful emotion and human suffering is part of what makes us human and part of what makes us the same. Learning to accept painful emotions and direct some kindness back to ourselves is part and parcel of self-compassion. To put it simply, think about self-compassion as treating yourself like you would treat a friend, family member, or loved one during times of pain or suffering. Psychologist Kristin Neff defines self-compassion as the desire to alleviate one's own suffering and involves the ability to be kind, non-judgmental, and show understanding towards ourselves even during times of pain and suffering. Self-compassion is comprised of 3 components. The first is self-kindness, and this is the ability to speak to ourselves with kindness, to be non-judgmental, to understand ourselves during difficult times, rather than trying to criticize or judge or punish ourselves. The second part is this concept of common humanity. And this is the idea that difficult experiences, painful emotions, setbacks, failure are all a universal part of human experience. There's nobody I know that hasn't failed or that hasn't experienced some kind of difficulty. So learning to understand that suffering is something we all have in common is really important. Often we start to believe that we could be the only ones who feel this way and the only ones who feel like a failure. So this is a really important concept. And the third is this idea of mindful acceptance of painful emotions. We all experience difficult emotions, but many of us try and push these away or perhaps avoid them. So learning to notice, tune in, and acknowledge and allow those difficult emotions to be there when we have a failure or setback or pain is really important. Often when we think about perfectionism, many perfectionists are great at avoiding difficult feelings. They develop this kind of maladaptive coping strategy when they have some kind of failure in the past. Rather than allowing those feelings to be there, they overcompensate by doing more, doing all the things, doing it absolutely perfectly so nobody knows that they're a failure and they don't have to deal with those difficult feelings. So learning to allow those feelings to be there is a really important part of self-compassion, and it allows us to direct some kindness back to ourselves so that we can build our motivation back up and keep going. Research shows that cultivating self-compassion is good for our psychological well-being. Numerous studies have linked self-compassion with our overall well-being. Studies have also shown that practicing self-compassion can lead to decreases in feelings of depression, stress, performance anxiety, and body dissatisfaction, and that practicing self-compassion can help improve feelings of happiness and self-confidence. Self-compassionate individuals are less likely to ruminate on negative thoughts, criticism, and self-pity, and this can help reduce or alleviate depressive symptoms. So if you're looking to cultivate some more self-compassion and let go of critical self-talk, here are some quick tips you can try. Tip number 1, pay attention to our self-critical or judgmental self-talk. Often our thinking patterns kind of go on autopilot and we don't really notice them. But we may have developed a pattern of self-criticism or judgment when we feel we've stuffed up or had a setback. Starting to notice your inner dialogue is really important. If you notice that your mind is criticizing yourself or judging yourself, call it out just by simply saying, I notice that I'm judging myself. I notice that I'm criticizing myself. By doing this, you'll start to bring this unconscious thinking style back into conscious control, and you can start to make some changes to your self-talk. Tip number 2, talk to yourself in the same way that you would talk to a friend, loved one, or family member that you care about who is going through something tough. The idea of talking to ourselves with kindness can feel really tough, especially if we've been pretty self-critical our whole lives. But think, what would I say to my friend if they were really upset? Rather than trying to be artificial or say something that feels a bit cheesy or nauseating, go for something that you would say to comfort someone else. That might be as simple as saying, this is hard. I can see that you're really having a tough time. It's okay. I'm here. It doesn't have to be anything that doesn't feel digestible for you. Finding your own way of speaking to yourself nicely that feels digestible and sits well with your style is so important. Tip number 3, practice self-compassion through your body. This might sound a little bit strange, but think about how we comfort others. Often when we see someone we care about who's hurting or who's upset, what do? We rush over and we give them a hug. We want to make sure they're okay and give them some physical care. But we may not be able to receive that care when we're feeling sad. So learning to do that for ourselves is really important. That could be as simple as putting a hand on your heart and directing a bit of warmth and compassion back to yourself. Or another variation I like is called the butterfly hug. This one comes from EMDR and it involves something called bilateral stimulation that helps us to calm down and feel better. So all you do is start by taking a few deep breaths and you make yourself a little butterfly by linking your thumbs together like that. Then you put the butterfly on your chest and you just start by very gently tapping one hand at a time and alternating as you breathe in deeply. And this can feel really calming, really soothing and relaxing, and can help direct a little bit of self-compassion inwards. Tip number 4, practice self-soothing and being kind to yourself on a tough day. So you've had a setback, maybe you've made a mistake or you've stuffed up at something that was really important. That really hurts. Acknowledge that feeling, then do something nice for yourself. If a friend was hurting, you'd probably tell them to take it easy. Maybe give themselves an easy day, or have an early night, or can they finish early and give themselves a bit of time to relax? What can you do for yourself to help you feel better? Could you go for a walk, make yourself a nice cup of tea, do some nice kind gesture for yourself that's going to help you through this and direct that compassion inwards. Doing that will allow you to re-energize and re-motivate so you can get back on task tomorrow. Practice mindfully noticing and recognizing painful emotions. This is a really hard one. If you're used to pushing away your feelings or avoiding them when you've had a setback or a tough time, this is going to be difficult, but it's so important that we allow those feelings to be there. A simple way to start is just by simply noticing and labeling what it is that you're feeling. So next time you have a tough day, check in with yourself and think, well, what's the feeling or the emotion I have? Is it sadness? Is it guilt? Is it shame? Just putting a label on it is really important. That's a great way to get in touch with it, but also noticing where you feel it in your body. Do you feel it in your belly? Do you feel it in your chest? Being able to do that can allow that feeling to be there. Allowing a feeling to be there helps us to behave in more effective ways. We can let that feeling be there, and then we can act in ways that are going to help us to recover and look after ourselves and direct some kindness back inwards. Today's video was all about self-compassion. I hope this topic resonated with you, and if it did, it'd be great if you could try and focus on redirecting some self-compassion back to yourself today. How can you talk to yourself in a kinder and more compassionate way, a less judgmental way? I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up, and I'd love it if you could subscribe to my channel so you never miss another Pop Therapy post again. Thanks guys, bye!